So I think I said last week that I tend to refer to this particular group of people as children and young people with care experience when talking about children and young people, or when I am referring to adults who have left care. They're no longer children and young people. So I would describe them as adults with care experience, or the whole lot, care experienced people. Now that is obviously a right old mouthful, but what that video was saying is that it's worth actually taking the effort to use the mouthful. I personally hate acronyms. An acronym is the term given to a set of kind of the first initials of a set of words. And within social work, it is used a lot. I went to a meeting the other day where it was on Zoom, and that one idiot was basically going, I'll get my PTM to RSD and ERN. And there are a number of reasons it's problematic. One is that it excludes people. I think that's really important. It excludes those that aren't in the know. And unless you're part of that little culture bubble, you don't know. Now, I'm quite confident as an individual. I'm confident that I know what I'm talking about. So I can go, what are you talking about? You're just saying letters. That's nonsense. But a lot of families don't have that confidence. They will assume that because they don't understand the weird language, and it is a weird language that is being used, that that's on them in some way, that they're stupid and not able to understand, and they sit quietly, unable to know what's going on. So the use of abbreviations, you've just got to be so careful about your language. One, to ensure that it doesn't exclude people. And every profession has their own language. I had builders in a few years ago, and they were talking about RSJs and steels and flanges and stuff. And I'm like, I don't know what they're talking about either. So all professions have their own language. And what I would say is you need to make your language accessible to those that aren't within your profession, because it's because of the jobs you're going to be going into. It's so important to make your language accessible. So that's the first thing to say, is stop using this stuff. It makes you look stupid. Actually, you think you're looking clever and you're looking like an idiot. So don't do it. The other thing is that it stigmatizes. It stigmatizes people that are the subject of the language. And in particular, the term lack, which is a shortening for looked after children. Now, being looked after by the state is the legal term written in legislation. To shorten looked after children to lack, well, to lack something, I know the spelling's wrong, but lacking, to be in deficit of something. That's why I think the term lack is especially egregious and shouldn't be used, because it all immediately speaks to this deficit. And lots of young people who have been in care say, why are you calling me lack? I'm lacking nothing. Stop it. So they don't like it. So we just need to think really carefully about the language that we use. I don't want to see you using this sloppy language, this lazy language. We're talking about human beings who are often have come from difficult and traumatic experiences, who are often trying to make sense of the world that they find themselves in. I think that the least we can do is take the time to actually think about the language that we use when talking about them, and indeed to them. There's a whole set of language around that. And we have LAC reviews, we have PEPs, which is short for personal education plans, even the language of contact. Contact is the name that's given to when children typically go and see a member of their birth family. Even the language of birth family is weird, but that's kind of an attempt to distinguish between the foster family and the birth family. So if you go and see your brother and sister, and you're not in care, then you go and see your brother and sister. If you're in care and you go and see your brother and sister, the language that's used for that is that you'll have contact with your siblings. Why are we saying that? Why are we saying contact with siblings? Contact is something that you do like with aliens, you know what I mean? And it's this attempt to over professionalize stuff that is completely unnecessary and puts barriers in. Another word, respite, is a term that's used within the care system. And that means where if a child is, say, living with a foster family and they go and spend a few days or a week or so with another fostering family, for a whole host of different reasons. I used to go to my nan's for a little holiday, or when the central heating was being put in, me and my sister were shipped off to my nan's for the week. But within care, that's called respite. Think about the word respite. What does that mean? It basically means to have a break from something that's unpleasant, to have a respite. So again, these are words that are used consistently within the care system, really, really unnecessarily, and actually have damaging consequences. Because again, that perception, if you need respite, that means you need time away from something unpleasant. And if I, as a foster dad, am asking for respite, the message that gives is that I'm asking for time away from something unpleasant, i.e. my foster children. And they are no more or less unpleasant than I'm entirely capable of being. When we're thinking about developing a package of support, we need to understand that package of support is going to be tailored and appropriate to meet the needs of that child. So we do need to identify individual needs. If there is a child who is in care, so they're looked after by the state, and in addition to that, they have a learning disability, we need to know that, right? We need to talk about that, and we need to understand what that learning disability has an impact on, and what kind of support we all need to do in order to ensure that that child thrives in the same way as all other children. So it's important to talk about and distinguish between different children. So labels they do have a purpose. There's a whole question to be had around labeling children and the usefulness of labels as well, which is kind of connected to, but slightly different to the issue of the use of acronyms. I suppose ideally we would be living in a world where if you're in a classroom full of children, does it make any difference if you know that one of the children is currently in care? Should it make any difference? What I want you to be doing is, when you go into practice, if you do discover a child is in care, that it's okay to know that, but what's not okay is to draw on all of those stigmatizing, stereotypical ideas that we have about children in care. So it's to disrupt and challenge some of those ideas. So it's a challenge. It is a real challenge. I mean, my particular area of interest is around education, and in particular, the education of children who are looked after. And there's a lot of discussion about whether or not within schools, who needs to know, who should know. Is it important that anyone knows? But the crucial thing for me is that idea that as soon as someone knows that there's a label, what meaning do people give to that label? Do they immediately go, like that picture last week, the aliens are coming, run away? Or do they go, okay, so this is a child who is potentially had quite a complicated history, and therefore needs us to be sensitive to that and let's go with that and take that on board and see how we can plan what we do with that child in a way that recognizes their complicated and possibly difficult and traumatic history, but also recognizes that they are children first and that we shouldn't just use the looked after child bit as the thing that solely defines who they are. Because trust me, we've been fostering for years, and so I've met quite a lot of children who have that label, and they're all very different because humans are very different, all completely individual. There is that additional layer of stuff that they've gone through in the past, which you need to be aware of and sensitive to, and think about, well, if I do something like this, then this is going to create a trigger for this child because it's going to connect to something that they've experienced in the past. So I'm going to be sensitive to that. I need to be sensitive to the possibility that I might unwittingly trigger something for them. This is all about being sensitive practitioners. So it's important to know something about children's history, but where we allow ourselves to be defining people by their label, I think is really important. It's a complex balancing act, isn't it? Don't you think? Because ideally we should be in a world where it shouldn't make any difference.